This is the Red Podcast.
This is episode number 37. Today we're talking about the online advice you get from gurus. Who should you listen to and who should you ignore? A lot of information out there. It's good, bad, and ugly. We'll tell you how to tell the difference on this episode of the Red Podcast.
This is the Red Podcast. Real entrepreneur development. Make more money, work less, and live a life of freedom. No BS advice that really works. Here's your hosts, David Hooper and Laurel Staples.
Laurel, what was the first music album you ever got?
Oh my gosh, David, we have to go back to the age of cassettes. And aside from Disney, some Disney cassettes that I had, including The Little Mermaid and Aladdin, my first real album was MC Hammer.
MC Hammer, classic.
MC Hammer. My sister had gotten Vanilla Ice, and she was older, and I was so jealous. So I couldn't get Vanilla Ice because she already got it, and I didn't totally want to be like her. So I got MC Hammer. And man, those songs get burned in your brain for the rest of time.
They were very, very catchy.
Yeah, they're taking up brain cells that you'll never get those back.
A buddy of mine worked on the Vanilla Ice album.
What do you do?
Marketing, promotion.
He did a good job.
Yeah, he was in the development of that, SBK Records, back in the day. The other big band they had was Wilson Phillips. You remember Wilson Phillips?
Not at all.
Okay, well, you and a lot of people probably. But yeah, Vanilla Ice, 8 or 10 million albums sold. It was a huge, huge record, and they couldn't get that thing out fast enough. They hadn't even licensed the music when they put it out. He sampled a lot of songs, didn't clear them. So a lot of people came back and sued him, but they were making so much money they didn't care. Of course, it really put white rappers on the map.
Kind of paved the way for Eminem. Years and years later.
It might have hurt him.
Oh, well.
But yeah, a good fun pop record, and we can look back on it a few years later and actually enjoy it again.
Well, David, what was your first album?
Very similar to Vanilla Ice in that a producer put this act together. First album was Cruisin' by the Village People.
That's not similar at all.
Yeah, it is, because record company men put it together.
A record company men put everything together. The band is not similar.
Here's what the Village People was, though. It was a bunch of dudes hanging out in a gay club, and a producer found them, picked them out. They didn't sing. Not live, anyway. They would lip sync. The singer was a real singer. The cop, the lead singer, he was the only straight guy, by the way. But yeah, it was like a fake band.
It's kind of like outsourcing, you know?
Yeah, the music was outsourced.
Exactly.
Yeah, but a classic one, though. A classic one. If I owned any song, well, actually, I'd like to own Vanilla Ice, MC Hammer, or the Village People. Any of those, I would own that copyright and license it all day. But here's the reason I'm thinking about it, and the reason I asked the question. I just finished a book. It's called And Party Every Day, about Casablanca Records, which was the label that the Village People was on. Also, the label that Kiss was on. Kiss was the first act they signed, and they really had a huge impact on American culture in the 70s, but also the record business. So anybody that's interested in the record business, the 70s, just business in general, this is a great book. It's called And Party Every Day. It's got sex, it's got drugs, it's got music, it's got more drugs. If
you take out the drugs and music, that's like the story of my life right there.
Yeah, it wouldn't be
Just
much
kidding.
of a book without that. It was a long book, mostly full of sex and drugs. But there is some music in there. It's a good one. And Party Every Day is the name of it, by one of the co-founders of the label. So if you're interested, check it out.
Would it be a good read for entrepreneurs, or is it more for musicians?
Either one. Especially entrepreneurs, though, because this was an independent label that, when they started, didn't really have anything. But the book goes into detail about how they built it, how they made other people want to invest, how they made other people want to get involved, how they got records played and started filling stadiums with people and what's important. It's a very, very good book for anybody interested in marketing. And it's also entertaining because there'll be stories about people that you know, certainly Village People, as I just mentioned, Kiss, Donna Summer, the Flashdance soundtrack was on Casablanca. And Casablanca actually got into movies. They were so successful, not just music. It was music and film works. So they were very, very big in the entertainment industry back in the 70s.
Well, you know your music.
I do. I do.
So on that note, let's transition into what we're talking about.
Well, we're going to talk about the blind leading the blind.
Yes. This reminds me of a story. This topic that we're doing today is that I talked to a guy. He was interested in doing coaching with me, and I talked to him, I guess, a couple months ago now. And I asked him what his business was and what he had done already to get set up, because he wanted to quit his day job and work for himself full time. And what he had done was he had found an expert online who he admired, who he thought had good advice and good content, and just followed that advice to a T. And what he had done is he had picked a niche, and he had written an ebook for that niche, and he had set up this website and this blog and everything like that. And I was looking at his website while I was talking to him, and I was like, well, how many books have you sold so far? Ebooks. And he tells me none. I was like, wow, okay, well, when did you launch? And he's like, well, 3 months ago. And I was like, oh, ouch. And that kind of to me was the blind leading the blind there. Is this guy didn't qualify the expert that he found online. He just blindly followed his advice, put all this work and all this time and all this effort, and didn't make a single sale. And that's kind of what gets me thinking of the blind leading the blind in this case.
There's so much bad information out there. With the internet, nothing is filtered, which is in some ways a very, very good thing. But everybody's got an opinion. When you start to look for information on marketing, it's almost like being on the Jerry Springer show. Have you ever seen these daytime TV talk shows where they'll get somebody on the stage and then the whole audience, one by one, will humiliate the guy? Everybody's got an opinion, and the opinions don't really matter. It's based on very little information. And does everybody deserve an opinion? Sure. Should you listen to it? Not necessarily.
The problem is on the internet, there is a lot of good information, but there's just a lot of junk out there. And it's confusing when you Google something and you want to learn about something, and there's a whole front page of results, and you don't know who on there knows what they're talking about, who's actually implemented the stuff, and who doesn't, who has no idea and just is kind of going on theory. And it does get really confusing. And this guy just went along with blindly being led by some guy who just said, this is how you do it like this, and he did it like that. It didn't work. To me, that's not even true entrepreneurship, because true entrepreneurship is experimentation. There's not one method to do something, but you do have to start with getting good advice if you're going to be following that advice.
Yeah, it's almost like working in a factory, isn't it? And that's what some people who have maybe had jobs in the past are looking for. It's a lot like buying a franchise. That would be a good analogy, where you're basically buying yourself a job. If you're looking for somebody to give you a book, an A to Z manual, soup to nuts, here's what to do, it's a procedure manual, that probably isn't going to work for you. It might have worked at one time, it might kind of work, but I love that what you said, Laurel. Entrepreneurship is experimentation. The true gains that you're going to have in your business and in your life come from jumping in and finding out what works for you.
And just knowing that with all the experts, quote unquote experts online, there's no barrier to entry to become an expert. And you have to take their advice, and you have to figure out what works for you. You can't just say, okay, they know what they're talking about, I'm just going to follow that, and that's how it is. You have to experiment.
So let's talk about some advice for people that are looking to have better marketing and what can they do to basically separate the BS from the good stuff? I think the first thing that people have to understand is that free advice can actually cost you a lot. That's the most expensive advice a lot of times, because if it's not correct, you're going to have to, one, lose money, but also go back and fix what you're losing money on so that you make money. So that's going to be extremely expensive. You're going to either pay now to shortcut things, or you're going to pay later when you have to fix things.
Well, what do you mean by free advice? Give me some examples of free advice versus paid advice.
Well, and paid advice isn't necessarily any better. What I'm really talking about is these message boards. I'm always very suspicious about somebody giving advice on a message board when it has the post count next to their name, and it'll have something like 11,900 posts. If that guy was actually making money using the advice that he's giving you, he's probably not posting. Doesn't have the time to post. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of people that think they know, they're very well read, but it doesn't matter. It hasn't been tested, and they don't know if it actually works or not. Sometimes if you say something again and again and again, even if it's a lie, it will become the truth. And there are a lot of rumors going around. For example, for podcasting, Laurel, you've heard the rumor that you only have 8 weeks to get on New and Noteworthy. Not true. Mm-hmm. Not true. It's never been tested. Somebody said it. They had a megaphone when they did. Other people started repeating it, and now it's just accepted.
What is the truth about iTunes, David?
It's new or noteworthy. So if you're new, certainly you can get in there. But if you are noteworthy, doesn't matter how old you are.
I think iTunes used the wrong conjunction. Should be new or noteworthy.
Well, it's new to you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think looking at free advice from that point of view, knowing that there is a lot of theory going on right there, and that people who are spouting out all this stuff, are they in it? Are they not in it? I mean, I think that's why you have to research who your experts are and look at, have they been in the trenches before, or are they just spouting out theory? Because I can go read books on birding, for instance, and then I can go write an article on birds, but I don't have any background on that. Maybe that's a really bad analogy, but I don't have any background, but it's like I'm appearing to be the expert online, but I haven't been birding before. I haven't researched for years. I don't have a degree in that. So I think you really have to look at, who are your experts? Who are these people?
Well, let me comment on your birding example. It's funny that you actually call it birding, because somebody who didn't know what they were talking about would call it bird watching. Only insiders call it birding. So I think that's one way that you can vet your experts to see if they're using the terminology. Now, if you don't know the terminology, I don't know what you're going to do. But it's pretty obvious from little bitty cues, like correct terminology or incorrect if they're using that somebody knows what they're doing or they don't know what they're doing. So let's go deeper into that. So first of all, I love what you said. Have they been in the trenches before, and are they just spouting theory? I would say also, I would ask, have they failed before? Do they have a story? There are a lot of people that have been very, very successful very quickly, and I think that's fantastic. I think that's an amazing thing when it happens. We all love the story of the guy who is the first-time lotto player, or he's never been to Las Vegas, and puts his money down and wins. Doesn't play it for 40 years like everybody else and loses house in the meantime. Love that instant story. But at the same time, that guy probably is not the best person to ask about the true experience of gaming. Same thing with your business. If somebody's just hit it out of the park right away and they haven't failed before and they haven't been through really what you've been through when you're struggling, I don't know if I'd want to take advice from that person. Not to say their success isn't legitimate, but they don't really know where you are.
It's like taking relationship or dating advice from somebody who married their high school sweetheart. It's like they haven't been in the trenches. They don't know about the dating world. They just found somebody and married them, and now they're in a relationship. So I don't want to take dating advice from that person.
Right.
But that person could